on this warm summer-like day, extra NYPD patrols have been in Central Park, and this was after a series of attacks and robberies. Police say this is a disturbing trend at one of the world's most recognizable parks.
Just when you start to think crime in New York can't get any worse, Central Park becomes the new battleground for the wallets and cell phones of the law-abiding. And although Central Park's never been 100% safe, experts say this new crime wave is something we've never seen before.
A scare in Central Park after 3 assaults in 2 days.
That's right. After multiple knife point robberies last week, 2 people were randomly attacked within the last 24 hours.
Concern in the city after a jump in Central Park robberies, at least 5 in 5 days, upending the kind of experience people expect.
We got some strangers out here, some weirdos, like as they say.
As a New Yorker, it's getting a bit scary.
It started Thursday night. The victim said a man demanded her wallet and cell phone. Police tell us that there were 2 more robberies on Friday.
This is a city. You have to be knowledgeable about your whereabouts, about how you're moving. It's not the neighborhood, it's the world in which we live in right now.
To me, that signals a greater problem with which way the city is going and how expensive things are and how difficult it is to live here.
Should be more security, like more guards outside.
Police are confirming to us that they stepped up patrols, but they're not giving out specifics on where exactly they are in this park and when they'll be there and how long they'll be in those locations.
A suspect was arrested and charged with grand larceny. It comes after 4 muggings between Thursday and Saturday.
So even New York's best park is now subject to a crime wave. But nobody's talking about how this is the predictable result of allowing the people who are arrested inside the park to walk free the same day they get caught doing something bad. And it's a shame. Critics also say this means the police can increase patrols all they want, yet the backs of their cars are effectively revolving doors. And as you'll soon see, many of the recent attacks were committed by people the city has arrested previously, but are powerless to lock up as progressive justice works its magic on the regular people in the park, who are effectively targets for attackers that fear nothing because there aren't any consequences. On top of that, the real reason we're seeing this crime wave is because the NYPD, they've got their hands full with a whole bunch of other problems. Protests, a dangerous subway system, out-of-control shoplifting, which is so bad one of the city's most expensive malls was recently completely shut down, all of the stores closed permanently. And when you consider that the subway's still not safe, even with the National Guard down there doing bag checks, it should come as no surprise that problems are gonna pop up in places like the park when the police are taken out of it to do something else. On top of that, Central Park has a design flaw that makes it wholly incompatible with the crime-ridden city New York is becoming, which is why experts say crime here is trending in the wrong direction. Yeah, you know, I don't see this crime wave that's on the news. I believe it's happening because they have footage and there are real people who were impacted, but the park looks pretty safe. But that's part of the problem. Looks can be deceiving.
Extra NYPD patrols have been in Central Park, and this was after a series of attacks and robberies. Police say this is a disturbing trend at one of the world's most recognizable parks. News 4's Erica Byfield live.
So, did you see that little map on the screen? Central Park is a big place. 843 acres of land. It's the 6th biggest park in New York, and the park has 42 million yearly visitors. And it's smack dab in the middle of the city, surrounded by expensive real estate. It's also open 24 hours a day, and even though there are cameras on the outskirts of the park and probably inside the park in places we can't see, it's large, it's hard to monitor this place, which is why attacks are happening at all hours of the day. Doesn't matter, morning, evening, night. Apparently criminals don't have a preferred hour to do their dirty work.
On Monday, just after 10 near East 60th and 5th, police arrested a man they say grabbed a woman's cell phone and then threw it in a pond. This after 4 muggings that began late last week near Central Park.
Did you see that? 10 a.m. That's the middle of the morning. And that's the exact same time we've got right now. Now, police have stepped up their patrols in the park, but it's frightening to think incidents were happening in conditions just like this. Because 10 a.m., this is when normal people come out to the park to enjoy it. And it's when people are supposed to be working, studying, at their most productive if they're not on vacation or taking a break. But right now, there could be maniacs blending in with all of this other foot traffic, and none of us even know it. And because the park was previously under-policed, criminals felt emboldened to do whatever they wanted. Plus, the park's layout is not exactly conducive to a safe environment if the area is full of criminals. Yes, it's very beautiful. Yes, there's these wonderful walkways. It's windy. It's got turns. There's trees. There's bushes. But look at where the entrances and exits are. You have them at various points along different sections and corners of the park. But look at this section right here. If you enter here and you're winding your way this direction, there's no way out of the park until you get all the way up to 65th Street. And as you can see, a narrow exit path like this doesn't leave you a lot of room to get away from somebody who might be pursuing you or who might want to block your path. And the further you work your way into the park's interior, the further you get from areas where you might find law enforcement. And at night, depending on where you are, the park can look and feel different than it does during the day.
It started Thursday night near West 97th Street and West Drive. The victim said a man demanded her wallet and cell phone. Police tell us that there were 2 more robberies on Friday.
Should be more security, like more guards outside.
In the morning near 50.
So when New York used to put its criminals behind bars, the number of dangerous individuals in the park was a lot lower than it is today, where nobody gets arrested or put in jail for anything. And the reason a serene, peaceful place like the park is changing is because people feel emboldened by the fact that they can come in here, do whatever they want, and nothing is going to happen to them. And was the woman in our first story running alone at night? Yes. Does that make her look like a target? Yes, it does, but she shouldn't have to worry about running alone at night in a park. I mean, the police should be protecting people in the park. And ask yourself who it is that runs or exercises or spends time in the park. Most of these folks, if they're not tourists, these are going to be people who are local to the neighborhood. Remember, the park is surrounded by apartments. And because this crime wave is new, you have a situation where the people that are in it, they're used to it being a lot safer than it is right now. And that's why nobody here really has any idea that what they've been doing for years is now an unsafe practice altogether. What's also crazy is this crime wave is happening as our leaders tell us crime overall in the city is down. But to the folks who've recently gotten in trouble down here, that's different from reality.
The second incident happened near East 59th and East Drive just after 6 Friday morning. Police say a 41-year-old man was taking pictures when 3 men appeared, one of whom was armed. The suspects took 2 cell phones, his wallet, and took off on mopeds. Later Friday night near East 1.
All right, as somebody who's here with a camera and is obviously filming themselves at 10 a.m., which is apparently danger hour, stories like this don't make me feel that safe. But that brings us to the next problem with the park, because the guy whose camera was stolen, he was robbed by people riding around on mopeds. In fact, it used to be illegal to ride anything around in here that wasn't a regular bicycle, but with an unmonitored environment and a level of moped-related crime that's already going through the roof in other parts of the city, it should be no surprise that the wrong types of vehicles are finding their way in here, and that puts people in danger. Also, last year, the city made some rule changes that basically allowed you to ride pretty much whatever you want here in the park. Now, there's nothing wrong with the skateboard-related thing right here, but think of people cruising around on 40-mile-an-hour mopeds in here. Now, yes, you're not supposed to ride the gas-powered mopeds here in the park, but the problem is the gas-powered ones look exactly like the electric-powered ones, and if you're somebody that doesn't really care about knowing the laws here in New York, and you've got a gas-powered one and you see your friends riding around in here, you're gonna do the exact same thing. And if you're a criminal and you do that and nobody stops you, it might embolden you to take the next step. And that's especially frightening because these vehicles are fast enough to ride with traffic on regular city streets, yet they're small enough to bring in and blend in with all of the other traffic here now that there's no restriction on what you can ride. And the idea of someone who's walking along at 2 miles an hour being approached by 2 people riding some crotch rocket of a vehicle who have ill intent, that's very scary. It's also frightening to think of what could happen if somebody's crossing the street here and a person goes flying by. There could be an accident. And the problem now is that people visiting the park are exposed to and growing accustomed to a higher level of danger than previous years. Because whereas in the past, somebody cruising around on an electric vehicle might have been a red flag, now it's business as usual. And it's probably a bad idea to allow e-vehicles in a crowded pedestrian paradise like this. See, people just ride around, ride through the crowds, got their music on. Pedestrians have to get used to this, and that's what puts people at risk.
A couple of stats to share with you from the NYPD. So far in this district, 18 robberies so far this year as compared to 4 in 2023. So definitely an increase there. An increase also slightly in grand larceny.
So robberies in the park way up over last year, and there's a reason that's happening. But before we discuss it, it's frightening that so many people who come to the park to relax and just want to take a load off now have to be on their guard when they're here. And it's too bad that people who want to experience a piece of the city's history now have to be on their guard when they do it. And this also means that only the more crowded areas of the park, like this southern western entrance, are as safe as they probably used to be just because of the massive amount of foot traffic down here. Because again, as you venture further into the park, you get further and further away from things that might keep you safe naturally, like foot traffic and a juice truck. But sadly, the real reason crime here is surging at levels we've never seen before is one that nobody really wants to talk about. And the frustrating thing about that is because if people were really interested in getting to the bottom of why we've got a crime problem here and New Yorkers would unite on this issue, it would probably go away. But as you're about to see, that's unlikely to happen anytime soon.
And says she can relate.
No, I don't feel like this neighborhood particularly is any more dangerous than any other.
The second incident happened near East 59th.
So the real problem that we've got here is that crime is up, yet many of the folks that frequent the park or feel like they know New York City don't want to talk about that. Maybe they don't know, maybe they don't believe that the park that looks as beautiful as it does on a day like today could actually be dangerous. Now yes, a handful or so of crime-related incidents in the last couple of weeks, that's nothing compared to the 42 million visitors that this place is going to see this year. But it's dangerous to say that something's not happening when it actually is. The attitude that that's just how life is, get over it, that's not how progress ever happens. And things are not going to get better unless people decide that there is a problem that needs fixing. And yes, there's the argument that 40, 50 years ago, crime in the city was a lot worse. And it's much less dangerous today than it was then. And although that may be true, at what point is society going to decide that backwards progress is not the kind of progress we should be proud of? And look at this, crime is at its highest point in the last 2 decades, which means it's the highest most of us have experienced in our lifetimes. And experts say that until all of society admits that there's something that needs fixing, it's never gonna change.
She calls that incident troubling, but says she still feels safe in the park.
This is a city. You have to be knowledgeable about your whereabouts, about how you're moving. It's not the neighborhood, it's the world in which we live in right now.
Near 74th and East.
She's mostly right. Every single person in the park right now, myself included, we've all got agency. We can all do things to help keep ourselves safe. And the idea of walking around with noise-canceling headphones on or glued to your phone watching TikToks is a bad idea in any part of a major city. And it's worth understanding that if you get distracted, the situation around you could change. You could find yourself all alone, and then something could happen that probably shouldn't have. But the problem is no amount of situational awareness will save you from a team of thugs that quickly approach you on a moped that goes 40 miles an hour. You can't be prepared for that. It's just gonna happen. And the other issue is we need to stop treating the people who commit crime as if they are victims of some other circumstance that made them do something wrong. Although that's probably not gonna happen either in this city.
To me, that signals a greater problem with which way the city is going and how expensive things are and how difficult it is to live here.
So again, we're talking to NYC.
You know, we all know that New York is not perfect, but that's painful to hear because if that's how most people in this city think, crime is just gonna continue and no one's gonna get blamed for it. The criminals aren't gonna be blamed for it. Instead, we're gonna blame those greedy landlords who own buildings like this and charge too much rent as the reason that there's crime. But the ridiculous thing about all of this is the same people who would say that the victims of crimes have agency to avoid those crimes are the ones saying that the criminals who commit the crimes don't have agency to do otherwise. And you know something? If that is true, if criminals cannot control their actions, many critics would say there's only one place for them to go.
The NYPD has started increasing patrols around the clock in Central Park and are encouraging park goers to be alert. This includes Harlem resident Desmond Williams, who at 6'3", 215 says he can handle himself while in Central Park, but he's always cautious.
Definitely got some strangers out here, some weirdos, like as they say, and watch over your shoulders, definitely.
You know, luckily not everybody here wants to gloss over New York City's problems and is willing to admit that there might actually be weirdos in Central Park. But that brings up another problem because the way the city decides to police crime is actually part of the reason why we have so many of these crime waves just popping up seemingly out of nowhere. And what nobody wants to discuss is that even if there is a police-related crackdown here in the park, all of those resources had to come from somewhere else, and that's where the next crime wave is gonna be.
We're following breaking news in the West Village where police say a fight ended with 2 people on subway tracks. It happened at West 4th Street train station on the A line just before 5 p.m.
So remember 2 months ago when the NYC subway was code red? Well, that hasn't changed after a massive police surge. But part of the reason the subway became a magnet for crooks was because the police force in the subway was reduced. And the only reason the police came back was because things got out of control. In fact, what most people don't know is that a year ago, crime was up, So there was a police surge based on overtime pay. Crime went back down. They pulled out the police. Crime came back, and now they put them back. And sadly, this is exactly what critics say is going to happen to the crime wave in Central Park. They'll call in the police, things will go down, then when the police leave, the crooks will come back. Or what they might end up doing is what they did to figure out Central Park was a great place to commit crime in the first place. Look for new opportunities because the police shut down the current opportunities like the subway. Now, this is not the fault of the NYPD. They've only got so many police. They've only got so much money. Yet they are expected to be everywhere at once, and now they're dealing with the college protests. Those are taking a lot of resources, which could be used to protect other parts of the city. But when their backs are turned, crime pops up somewhere else. And not only is that a problem for police today, it's going to be even more of a problem tomorrow because they're having trouble filling their police academy classes. Back in 2016, police academy classes were full and you had to pay a fee if you wanted to get in. But lately they haven't been able to fill the classes and the entrance fee has been waived, which means we're not recruiting enough police. On top of that, the police force we have is dealing with a record number of resignations, which means veteran police won't be around to train new police. And that's essentially the worst of both worlds. You've got declining experience, and the inexperienced recruits you have aren't enough to fill in the gaps, and they may take a long time to get to the level of the police who've been lost to retirements. And what's incredible to consider is that the situation in the subway only really started to stabilize once the National Guard were called in. And with so many different crime-related crises happening in New York all at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if we see National Guard respond to some of the college protests if they keep going. And what that means is New York City is headed to total police state territory. The problem with the National Guard is they're not there to protect your rights. These are military troops who are designed to put down whatever the problem is, which means New Yorkers could continue to lose their freedoms because the city's laws don't allow the police to put actual criminals in jail, and that makes all of us less free. Is that true? And what do you think about the Central Park crime spree? Is it really happening? The news says so, but it looked pretty safe today. Maybe that's because the police are already there. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.